The morning sun cast long shadows across the overgrown estate as Zara Chen pulled her ancient pickup truck through the imposing iron gates. The GPS on her cracked phone screen had led her to this address, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer magnitude of what lay before her. The mansion loomed like something from a fairy tale, all stone and glass and architectural ambition. But the grounds told a different story entirely. Weeds had claimed victory over what must have once been pristine lawns, wild vines strangled elegant topiaries, and flower beds had become jungles of competing plants. It was beautiful in its own chaotic way, but Zara could see the bones of something magnificent underneath all that neglect. She'd always had an eye for potential, for seeing what could be rather than what was. She climbed out of her truck, her work boots crunching on the graveled driveway. The job posting had been vague. Extensive grounds maintenance needed, with an address and a generous hourly rate that seemed almost too good to be true. Zara had learned not to question good fortune too closely. In her line of work, you took what came and did your best with it. The lawnmower in the back of her truck was older than she was, temperamental beasts that required coaxing and occasional threats to function properly. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, and it had never let her down when it truly mattered. She wheeled it down the truck's ramp, checking the gas and oil levels out of habit. From somewhere inside the mansion, classical music drifted through open windows. The sound seemed almost mocking against the backdrop of the overgrown garden, as if the house itself was remembering better days. Zara had grown up around wealth, working for families who could afford weekly landscaping services, but this felt different. It felt abandoned despite the obvious signs of occupancy. She started with the front lawn, pulling the starter cord with practiced efficiency. The mower coughed to life, settling into its familiar rumbling rhythm. The grass was easily knee-high in places, thick and stubborn from months of unchecked growth. Each pass of the mower revealed more of the original landscape design, elegant curves and natural borders that someone had planned with care. Zara worked methodically, losing herself in the meditative rhythm of the task. She'd always been most comfortable in silence, finding conversation awkward and unnecessary. Her hands spoke louder than her voice ever could, shaping the world around her with quiet determination. Asterisk from his study window on the second floor. Daniel Pierce watched the woman with the old lawnmower work her way across his property. He'd been expecting a landscaping crew, maybe 3 or 4 workers with professional equipment and matching uniforms. Instead, a single woman had arrived with what looked like equipment from a garage sale, and she was accomplishing more in 2 hours than his previous service had managed in a month. Daniel set down his coffee cup and leaned closer to the window. Something was mesmerizing about the way she moved, completely focused on her task, despite the overwhelming scope of it. She didn't seem intimidated by the size of the job or deterred by the ancient equipment. She just worked steady and sure, carving order out of chaos, one strip of grass at a time. He found himself abandoning his morning emails to watch her progress. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of experience, never wasting energy, but never rushing either. When she reached the old rose garden that his mother had planted decades ago, she paused for a long moment, studying the overgrown bushes with what looked like genuine interest rather than the calculating assessment of most contractors. The music from his sound system seemed suddenly inappropriate, too artificial for the honest work happening outside his window. Daniel turned it off, preferring the distant sound of the lawnmower and the occasional call of birds in the ancient oak trees that bordered his property. Around noon, the sound of the mower died abruptly. Daniel looked up from his laptop to see the woman bent over the machine, pulling at something in the engine housing. She tried the starter cord several times, but the engine only wheezed and fell silent. Even from his window, he could see the frustration in her shoulders. Though she didn't throw tools or curse the way most people would have. Without really thinking about it, Daniel found himself heading downstairs. He'd always been hands-on in business, preferring to solve problems directly rather than delegating them away. Something about the woman's quiet persistence had struck a chord in him. Reminding him of his own approach to seemingly impossible challenges, he grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and stepped out onto the back terrace. The heat hit him immediately, a reminder of how hard she'd been working in the summer sun. She looked up as his footsteps approached, her dark eyes weary but not unfriendly. Dirt streaked her cheek, and her black hair had escaped its ponytail. In wisps around her face. "Looks like you could use a break," Daniel said, offering the water bottle. Up close, he could see the calluses on her hands, the small scars that spoke of years working with tools and plants. Something was refreshing about meeting someone whose hands told the story of their work so clearly. "Thank you," she said quietly, accepting the water with a nod. Her voice was softer than he'd expected, with a slight rasp that suggested she didn't use it often. She drank deeply, and he noticed how she held herself, alert but not tense, like someone accustomed to being overlooked, but ready for anything. "I'm Daniel Pierce," he said, extending his hand. "I live here." "Zara Chen," she replied, her handshake firm and brief. "The mower's having a temperamental moment. It'll start again in a few minutes?" "Always does." Daniel glanced at the ancient machine, its paint faded and housing dented from years of use. "How long have you had it?" "About 10 years. Bought it used from a guy who was retiring." Zara patted the mower's side with something approaching affection. "It's reliable once you understand its moods." Something was charming about her matter-of-fact relationship with the machine. The way she spoke about it, like an old friend rather than a tool. Daniel found himself genuinely curious about this quiet woman, who tackled impossible jobs with impossible equipment and somehow made it work. "The garden looks incredible already," he said, gesturing toward the areas she'd cleared. "I haven't seen it look this good in years." Zara followed his gaze, and he caught a glimpse of satisfaction in her expression before she tucked it away again. "It has good bones," she said simply. "Just needed some attention." The understatement was so profound that Daniel almost laughed. The property had been neglected for nearly 3 years. Ever since his mother's death had left him unable to bear the sight of her beloved garden slowly dying. He'd hired several services over the years, but none of them had understood what they were looking at. They'd seen overgrown landscaping. Zara saw potential. "My mother planted most of this," he found himself saying. "She had a real gift for it. I've never been able to match her touch." Zara nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Plants remember love," she said quietly. "Even when they're forgotten for a while, they remember. That's why they come back so strong when someone cares again." The simple wisdom of the statement caught Daniel off guard. In all his years of business negotiations and strategic planning, he'd rarely encountered such clear insight delivered so quietly. Most people felt compelled to fill thesillance with words, but Zara seemed comfortable letting her observations stand alone. She bent down and gave the mower's starter cord another pull. This time, the engine caught with a satisfying roar, settling into its working rhythm as if it had never faltered. Zara looked up with a small smile, the first he'd seen from her. "Told you," she said, and there was a hint of humor in her voice that transformed her entire face. "It just needed to think about it for a minute." Daniel found himself smiling back, charmed by her quiet confidence and the obvious affection she had for her temperamental equipment. "Well, I'll let you get back to it. If you need anything else, just give a shout." As he walked back toward the house, Daniel found his thoughts returning again and again to the woman with the old lawnmower. There had been something peaceful about their brief conversation, a lack of agenda or expectation that he rarely encountered in his daily life. She hadn't asked him what he did for work, or shown any of the calculating interest that usually followed introductions at his social level. She'd simply been present, focused on her work, and comfortable in her own skin. By late afternoon, the transformation was remarkable. What had been a wild tangle of grass and weeds that morning now showed clear pathways and defined spaces. The old rose garden was visible again, structure emerging from years of overgrowth, like a sculpture being revealed from rough stone. As the sun began to set, Zara loaded her equipment back into her truck. Daniel found himself at the window again, watching her secure the mower with practiced efficiency. She moved with the same quiet competence she'd shown all day, every action purposeful and precise. On impulse, he headed downstairs again, catching her just as she finished checking the truck's tailgate. She looked up as he approached, those dark eyes alert but not unwelcoming. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. though he'd already decided to clear his morning schedule to be here. "If you'd like," Zara replied, pulling work gloves from her back pocket. "There's still a lot to do." "I'd like that very much," Daniel said, meaning it more than he expected to. "Thank you for today, really. You've given me my mother's garden back." Something shifted in Zara's expression, softening around her eyes that suggested his words had touched something deeper than professional pride. She nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed more gratitude than a speech would have. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Pierce," she said, climbing into her truck. "Daniel," he corrected gently. "Just Daniel." She paused with her hand on the door, considering this. "See you tomorrow, Daniel." The second morning brought unexpected rain, a gentle summer shower that turned the freshly cut grass emerald green and filled the air with the rich scent of earth and growing things. Daniel found himself at his study window earlier than usual, watching for Zara's truck through the misty morning light. When her truck finally appeared through the gates, Daniel felt an odd sense of relief. He'd half convinced himself that yesterday had been some kind of fluke, that the competent woman with the ancient lawnmower might disappear as suddenly as she'd arrived. But there she was, punctual and prepared, pulling equipment from her truck despite the drizzle. From his window, Daniel watched her assess the weather with the same practical consideration she'd given everything else. Instead of the mower, she selected hand tools from her collection, along with what looked like pruning shears and a small folding saw. The rain didn't seem to deter her at all. If anything, she appeared to welcome it as an opportunity to work on tasks that required more precision than power. Daniel found himself abandoning his morning routine entirely, making coffee for two and assembling what he hoped would pass for a decent breakfast. His housekeeper only came twice a week, and his usual morning meal consisted of whatever he could grab between phone calls. But something about Zara's presence made him want to make an effort to offer hospitality that matched her quiet professionalism. By the time he made it outside with the coffee and a plate of pastries, Zara had already begun the delicate work of freeing his mother's roses from their prison of weeds and overgrowth. She worked with surgical precision, her movements careful and deliberate as she identified what to cut and what to preserve. "Coffee," he offered, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. She looked up, rain droplets clinging to her hair, and smiled that small smile he was beginning to treasure. That would be perfect. They stood together in the gentle rain, drinking coffee and watching the garden slowly emerge from years of neglect. Daniel realized he felt more at peace than he had in months, maybe years. There was something about Zara's quiet presence that made him feel more grounded or connected to the world beyond his business concerns and social obligations. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about expanding my company's environmental consulting division. We could use someone who understands how to bring things back to life." Zara paused, her cup halfway to her lips. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity," Daniel replied. "What do you do best, but on a larger scale?" "To help other people find what they've lost." She was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes studying his face. "Plants remember love," she said finally. "Maybe people do too." "Maybe they do," Daniel agreed. As her taillights disappeared through the gates that evening, Daniel stood in his driveway, surrounded by the scent of fresh earth and the promise of restoration. For the first time in years, his mother's garden felt alive again, and he suspected that Zara Chen was just getting started. 3 months later, as he watched her direct a team of landscapers at a corporate complex downtown, Daniel smiled. She'd kept her old pickup truck and her temperamental mower, but now she had resources to match her vision. The shy woman who'd arrived at his gates with ancient equipment had become something extraordinary, a gardener who understood that the most important thing she cultivated wasn't plants, but hope. Asterisk the end, asterisk, asterisk. Like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.